Hi, I'm Ty, and for the past 5 years, I've been talking about everything Disney-Pixar cars on my channel, primarily focusing on the merchandise, but oftentimes talking about the movies as well. I've had a love for this franchise since I was a really young kid, and being able to share my love for it on YouTube has been one of the best things to happen to me in the past few years of my life. I love coming on here basically every day and making Cars videos. And you guys seem to love it too, as I recently hit 4,000 subscribers. So to celebrate that milestone, I'm finally releasing a video that I've been working on for a very long time. A Cars franchise Iceberg video. This is a video that I've wanted to do for a very long time. I started working on it back in July, and now here we are in February, and it's finally coming out. For those of you who don't know, an iceberg chart is basically a way of displaying information about a franchise or subject through a tiered list. Each tier contains a bunch of different topics. The most well-known information is at the top of the image, or the tip of the iceberg. That's where the whole concept comes from, the phrase just the tip of the iceberg. And so, as you'd expect, as the list goes further and further down with each tier, the information and the topics become more and more obscure. I've been building my very own Disney-Pixar Cars series Iceberg since July with the help of several people. I'd like to thank 95fan and Robin Tailsfighter for both giving me a bunch of ideas for topics to put on this, and for always being there whenever I had questions or needed some help with research for this video. Thank you so much, guys. And thank you to all of you for helping me reach 4,000 subscribers. We're now beyond that. And for being so patient for this video that was supposed to be out back in like August. This video exploded and became way bigger than I could have ever imagined. It's now the longest video ever uploaded on my channel, and I hope you guys enjoy it. I really hope it was worth the wait. I hope you guys enjoy the video. If you do enjoy the video, please consider subscribing. And also, I'm sorry for any strange audio throughout the video. I recorded this over the course of like 6 months, so the audio may be a bit weird in one or two places. Anyway, let's get started with the first tier of the iceberg, the tip of the iceberg. Cars Tunes. Cars Tunes are a series of Cars shorts that were released on the Disney Channel and in several other formats starting in around 2008. There were 2 different series of these, Mater's Tall Tales and later Tales from Radiator Springs. Celebrity cameos and parodies is a pretty simple one. This refers to the very large amount of different celebrities that are parodied throughout the Cars series. Oftentimes, different celebrities will voice carified versions of their own characters, like Jay Leno providing the voice for Jay Limo in the first Cars, and several different Piston Cup racers and other race cars throughout the Cars series have been voiced by real-world racers, such as Jeff Gordon playing Jeff Gorvette, or Ryan Blaney playing Ryan Laney in Cars 3. Todd. Todd is the name given to the Cars universe's version of the Pizza Planet truck, the classic Pixar Easter egg. Todd appears in all 3 of the Cars movies and has been released in several forms of merchandise. A113, a reference to the room number at the California Institute of the Arts. A113 has appeared in nearly every Pixar movie. It's one of the classic Easter eggs, just like Todd the Pizza Planet truck. And of course, the Cars movies are no exception to having A113s in them. Most notably, A113 is Mater's license plate, and it also appears in some other places, such as on Sidley's tail in Cars 2, on Sterling's office door in Cars 3, and I believe some others as well. 2010 canceled Cars. A bunch of Cars diecasts that were originally set to be released in 2010 were canceled, most likely due to the release of Cars 2 the following year. These cars are easily among the most famous canceled cars in the entire Disney Cars diecast line, and include a bunch of Pitties, a bunch of Haulers, and several others such as Trev the Train, the Vroom Around Us Buggus, and a bunch of other cars. Since 2010, a lot of these items have been officially released or uncancelled, but we're still waiting on a bunch of them. Most notably, not a single one of these haulers has been released. EU series. EU stands for Expanded Universe, and it's a term used within a bunch of different franchises to refer to things outside of the immediate main source material. The Cars diecast line has several different series released in it that are seen as expanded universe series, things created originally for the diecast line or based off of books or other things that didn't appear in the movies, Cars tunes, etc. Nowadays, we tend to get one or two of these series every year, usually focusing around character variants of race cars or the main cast. The Apple Racer. Apple was included as a sponsor in the first Cars movie as a reference to Steve Jobs' involvement with Pixar. The Apple car's name is Mac iCar and he races as number 84, a reference to the year that the first Mac computer was released. Apple returned as a Piston Cup sponsor again in Cars 3 with two new racers, the as of yet unnamed Veteran and the next-gen JP Drive. The official diecast for Mac iCar has only ever been released once, back in the giant 2008 Motor Speedway of the South 36-pack, which was exclusive to members of the Hot Wheels Redline Club. Yeah, they made a Disney Cars item exclusive to members of a Hot Wheels fan club. I don't know whose idea that was. The Apple Racer has never seen another release, and neither of the Cars 3 versions of the racer have been released by Mattel either, most likely for legal issues. Probably don't have the rights to make Apple-related products. However, two other Cars diecast lines, the Disney Store and Tomica's lines, have both made their own versions of the next-gen racer, JP Drive, but neither of these are in scale with Mattel's 155 scale diecasts. Planes. In 2013 and 2014, Disney Toon Studios, that's right, not Pixar, created two Planes movies as spin-offs of the Cars series. These focused around planes instead of cars, and starred Dusty Crophopper in his adventures racing in the Wings Around the Globe rally and joining the Piston Peak Fire and Rescue Squad. The Plane series has fallen into obscurity following the release of Cars 3, and with Disney Toon Studios having been shut down back in 2018, any sort of continuation to the Plane series is highly unlikely. Dinoco and Toy Story. Although it's now famous from the Cars series, Dinoco is actually a reference to the gas station Buzz and Woody get stuck at in the first Toy Story movie. Here its logo is red, and in the Cars movie, the Dinoco logo is famously blue. Dinoco appeared again in Toy Story 4, now using a revised Cars 3 blue Dinoco logo. Cars Land. Cars Land opened in Disney California Adventure in 2012, and has been open and operating in the park ever since. The land is a beautiful, real-world recreation of Radiator Springs with several rides, including the famous and amazing Radiator Springs Racers. Video games. The Cars series is no stranger to video game tie-ins, with the most notable being the original trilogy of Cars the video game, Cars International, and Cars Race-O-Rama, with each of these telling their own unique story. Then we got Cars 2 the video game and Cars 3 the video game, which ditched most story aspects for more of just a racing game. Kerchoo. Over the years, Lightning McQueen's ridiculous catchphrase, "Ka-chow," has been memed on to death. This entry is basically just there representing all of the memes regarding Ka-chow or Lightning himself. He's become, like many protagonists from animated movies from the past 20 years, a pretty notable figure in meme culture. And oftentimes, in memes or joke posts, whatever, Ka-chow will be pronounced Kerchoo instead. Although not on this iceberg, Chick Hicks's version of the catchphrase Kachiga has also become quite a meme, as well as several different scenes of Chick Hicks, because the guy's just an absolute legend.
Wow.
Owen Wilson is known for having a very unique pronunciation of the word wow. He's just got kind of a strange way he says it, and it's kind of like a catchphrase, with him saying wow in an absolute ton of appearances in movies over the years. And with Owen Wilson being the main voice for Lightning McQueen in the Cars series, he's said wow on several occasions throughout the different Cars movies. Each movie contains at least one wow, with Cars 2 only having one wow, I believe, but Cars 1 and 3 having quite a few. And it should be noted that Owen Wilson isn't the only one with a signature catchphrase appearing in the Cars series, as Larry the Cable Guy's classic "Get Her Done" and several other catchphrases of his are used by Mater throughout the franchise. Thailand Cars. Midway through 2018, the Cars diecast line began being made in Thailand instead of in China. And when this started out, it caused for a lot of the cars looking quite a bit worse than their former counterparts. However, over the years, Thailand has gotten a whole lot better at making the cars, and a lot of them, some would argue, are improvements over their original made in China counterparts. A lot of collectors are really interested in seeing what cars will be made in Thailand next, keeping track of Thailand variants versus China variants and the differences between them. In addition to the cars mainline being made in Thailand, the other cars, such as multi-packs or store exclusives or expanded universe cars, are made in Vietnam instead of China, although China did continue to make them for about a year after the Thailand switchover. Now, every diecast is made in either Thailand or Vietnam. And while most people know of the cars being made in Thailand now, what many people don't know is that the Cars diecast line, as well as the Planes diecast line when they were first introduced, were both made in Thailand before being switched to made in China. So, in a way, with the cars being made in Thailand again, we've kind of come full circle. Rip's death. Originally, World Grand Prix racer Rip Klutchgonski was supposed to be killed by the Lemons camera in Cars 2, hence why his name is Rip Klutchgonski. Rip meaning RIP and Klutchgonski meaning gone in the sky. This is also presumably the reason why Rip is the only World Grand Prix racer to hail from a fictional country. He races for New Rearendia, which is obviously not a place in real life. Rip's death caused him to be cut from a lot of merchandise, including the original run of the Cars diecast line, where he was meant to be released as number 36, but was not, leaving the final version of the toy line without a number 36. Although Rip's regular diecast was eventually released, and several variants of him have been released since, this is notable as he's the only World Grand Prix racer who wasn't released then. He also was set to have a Silver Racer release that got cancelled, and was missing from most Cars toy lines that came out at the time of the launch of Cars 2, as well as the Cars 2 video game, although he wasn't the only WGP racer to not be in the game. Now, we don't have any confirmation that the original plans for Rip's death is the reason why he was skipped over in most merchandise lines, but it probably is why. Although, then again, Raw Torque Redline was released in a lot of merchandise at the time, and he actually died in the final version of the movie, but whatever. In the end, Rip Klutchgonski luckily survived Cars 2, suffering minimal injuries after being shot by the camera in the final cut of the movie, and he's appeared in several places since, including all of the different TROC Cars diecast lines, aside from the ones in which he wasn't released, but the majority of them he has a release on. To Protect and Serve. This is a cancelled Cars tune that was supposed to be released back in 2015, focusing around Sheriff leaving to go on vacation and bringing in two new police officers, Mike and Dee Dee, to take care of Radiator Springs while he's gone, and hijinks ensue because of the two of them. Although merchandise for it was released, including diecasts from both Mattel and the Disney Store, the short was unfortunately cancelled and is still yet to be released as of 2021, and at this point, it probably never will see the light of day. One of the pieces of merchandise released, though, was a young reader's storybook, which contains several images and a plot recap for the Cars tune, so at least we have a better sense of what it would be about. Cars on the Road. This Iceberg took me so long to make that I actually had to fully re-record this part of it after we got more information. After being rumored for a very long time, a Cars Disney Plus series was officially announced in December of 2020 for a late 2022 release date. It's set to focus around Lightning McQueen, Mater, and the other cars of Radiator Springs, meeting friends old and new as they go on a road trip. Almost a year later, in November of 2021, we learned that the series name would be Cars on the Road, got a look at some concept art, and also learned that Larry the Cable Guy and Owen Wilson would be reprising their roles for the series, despite previous rumors not having Owen Wilson return and saying that Keith Ferguson, the backup voice actor for Lightning who played him in all the Cars tunes, would be playing him. I think that Ferguson does a great job at voicing Lightning. More than half the time I can't even tell it's a different guy. But I'm really glad to see Owen Wilson will be returning for this. I didn't think he was going to. He's already on another Disney Plus show. He's on the Loki show, of course, but It's great to have him back, and I'm very excited to see how this show turns out when it launches at the end of this year. The fact that it's not out yet is the reason why it's not on the top layer of the iceberg. By the end of the year, it probably should be. Easter eggs in other movies. This is another very broad one. Of course, since Cars is a Pixar movie, there are several references to the Cars series throughout other Pixar movies. Some ones just off the top of my head are Doc Hudson appears in The Incredibles, as does Red. I believe Luigi appears very briefly in Finding Nemo. A kid in Coco has Lightning McQueen's shoes. I believe in Finding Dory, there's a guy with a Lightning McQueen band-aid on his hand. A bunch of things like that. Once again, a pretty broad topic. Going through every reference to the Cars movies and other movies, I'd probably be here for quite a while. So, another thing that I definitely suggest looking into if you're interested in it. Which I definitely suggest because I'm a really big fan of Easter eggs and connections, and they're really cool to see. Missing Cars 3 sponsors. Going into Cars 3, 5 of the Piston Cup sponsors for the first movie were ditched and replaced with new ones. The ones that were cut are Taco Mint, Fiber Fuel, Shifty Drug, Retread, and Sidewall Shine, and technically Chick Hicks' sponsor HTB as well. Despite being cut from Cars 3 and being replaced by Intersection, Combustor, Carbon Cyber, Synergy, and Blinker, these old sponsors came back in 2021 in the diecast line, sponsoring new characters in the NASCAR crossover toy line. Cars tunes are canon. This is sort of a theory, sort of not. It's never been 100% confirmed, but as a little ending gag, every episode of the Cars Tunes Mater's Tall Tales series features a little cameo referencing the fact that the story Mater told could have been true. Usually a character from Mater's story will suddenly appear, or maybe Mater will do something relating to his story, confirming that it did in fact happen. To this day, whether or not any of the events of the Cars tunes really happened have not been confirmed, and I highly doubt they ever will be. They're supposed to be tall tales. You're not supposed to know whether or not they really happened. McQueen's model change. In 2017, when Cars 3 was coming out, a new Lightning McQueen diecast mold was created for Cars 3 versions of the character, with this one being a bit longer and thinner than his Cars 1 diecast mold. To this day, the two molds are used pretty independently of each other, with Cars 1 McQueens using the old mold, and Cars 3 McQueens using the new mold, although there are some exceptions, but of course there are always exceptions, because Mattel is always going to make mistakes with their cars. Tokyo Party changes. While Jeff Gorvette is seen conversing with McQueen and Lewis Hamilton in the American version of Cars 2 at the Tokyo Party scene, depending on which version of the movie you watch, which international version you watch, Jeff will be replaced by a different character, a new character that only appears in that scene, voiced by a racer from that part of the world. The most famous of these is Frosty in Australia, but there are several others as well. Miss Fritter's Racing School. This was a short included with the home media release of Cars 3, where Miss Fritter and some of the other Cars 3 Demolition Derby cars try to advertise a racing school where you can learn from them. There really isn't all that much to say about this. It is a very short. Other Cars rides. In addition to those in Cars Land, there are a few other Cars rides in different parts of the world. Most of them actually opened up pretty recently. Most recently was Disneyland Paris's Cars Road Trip attraction, which just released in the summer of 2021. I actually did a whole video going over my thoughts on it when it first opened up. There's also the Lightning McQueen's Racing Academy, which opened up in Disney Hollywood Studios in Florida back in 2018. Actor recasts. Over the years, quite a few Cars characters have had their voice actors recast for a variety of reasons. Most of these were due to voice actors having passed away, but there are some other examples. Some of the more notable voice actor recasts include Fillmore, who's been played by Lloyd Sher starting in Cars 2, following the passing of George Carlin, his original voice actor. Red was originally played by Pixar employee Joe Ranft, who unfortunately passed away before the first Cars movie was released. In subsequent appearances, his brother Jerome Ranft has been his voice. Michael Keaton voiced Chick Hicks in the first Cars movie and several subsequent appearances, but he did not return to reprise the role for Cars 3. Instead, Cars 3 co-writer Bob Peterson, who had also previously voiced Chick Hicks' Pity in the first Cars, provided the voice for Chick Hicks in Cars 3. Two actors that were not recast, however, are Paul Newman, who played Doc Hudson in the first Cars. Following his passing, archive audio was used for the character in Cars 3. The same scenario was true for Rusty's voice actor, Tom Magliozzi. More recently, Katherine Helmond and Junior Johnson, the voices of Lizzie and Junior Moon respectively, both passed away in 2019. Whether or not they will be recast is yet to be revealed, but I'd assume Lizzie will probably receive a new voice actor for Cars on the Road and subsequent appearances. Fast as Lightning. Cars Fast as Lightning was a mobile game first released in 2014, created by the company Gameloft. Unfortunately, the game was shut down in 2016, but it's still playable if you previously had downloaded it. Although some people, such as myself, have since been locked out of their accounts, unfortunately. The game was half city builder, half racing game, where you could put together your own radiator springs and also unlock around 20 or so different racers, get them new paint jobs, and stuff like that. You could also customize your racetracks and add stuff. It was a really fun game. I absolutely loved it when it was out. It also featured quite a bit of DLC. Doc's death scene. Probably now one of the most famous deleted scenes from the Cars series is the death of Doc Hudson. We were supposed to see this at one point in the development of Cars 3. Although we do have a description of how it was supposed to go down from the people who made Cars 3, the scene has not been released in any form. We don't have the storyboards or anything. This scene has had quite a bit of speculation around it, although Pixar says it was cut for being too sad to go in the movie. Surprising considering Pixar's reputation of making incredibly emotional scenes, but understandable once you remember the fact that the actor who played Doc Hudson, Paul Newman, unfortunately passed away in between the release of the first two Cars movies. Cars 3 original ending. This is another one of the most famous Cars deleted scenes, and it also comes from Cars 3. But unlike Doc Hudson's death scene, we actually have a full storyboard of how this scene was supposed to go. Originally, Lightning was supposed to take the number 51 and the Dynaco sponsor in the Florida 500 race at the end of Cars 3, and he was supposed to flip over Jackson Storm instead of Cruz. Cars 2 deleted scenes. This one is quite simple, it just refers to deleted scenes from Cars 2. Several of them have been officially released on the home media releases, and they include some pretty interesting things. If you haven't seen them, I definitely suggest checking them out. I'm pretty sure most of them have been uploaded to YouTube at this point. Cars deleted scenes. The same thing goes for deleted scenes from the first Cars movie. Several have been released with the home media releases of the Cars series over the years. Once again, I definitely suggest checking them out. There are some pretty interesting ones of how the story was originally going to go that have been officially released. There are some pretty famous ones from the first movie, like the scene of how Ramon and Flo met, the original plans for how Lightning was to get lost, and some other things like that. Meet the Cars. Meet the Cars is a reference book that has had 3 editions as of 2021, one released for each of the Cars movies. It's basically like a character encyclopedia, giving you a brief description of several notable and minor Cars characters. There's also a Meet the Planes book, but since nobody remembers planes, nobody really remembers that that book exists. Knockoffs. Like any popular franchise mainly aimed at children, the Cars series has had quite a few knockoffs, from knockoff merchandise, which I currently cover in a series on my channel called Weird Knockoff Products, to knockoff movies, such as the famous A Car's Life and The Little Car. These are absolutely terrifying. Please get that away from me. Humans. Humans don't exist in the Cars series, but that hasn't stopped people from asking how the cars are alive, where they came from, and if humans existed at one point. No, they almost definitely didn't, and most of the time people are asking this jokingly or ironically, but still, I thought it was just notable to mention because basically everyone has asked at one point, where are the humans? Storybooks. Several different children's storybooks have been released surrounding the Cars series over the years. A lot of these just recap the events of the movies, but a lot of them are new stories as well. Probably the most famous of these is Mater Saves Christmas, which has gotten diecasts released for it year after year. Star Wars crossover. From 2013 to 2015, three different waves of Disney Cars Star Wars crossover diecasts were released in the Disney parks. These had the Cars characters playing the roles of different Star Wars characters, with Lightning as Luke Skywalker, Vader as Mater, so on and so forth. They only released characters from the original trilogy, and the line stopped after 2015. Notably, several Cars characters are missing, including Sheriff and Flo, and the cars actually weren't made by Mattel, they were made by the Disney Parks Company, but they are in scale and incredibly similar to the Mattel counterparts. Red Ransburg McQueen. Red Ransburg McQueen is the rarest Cars diecast ever made, with there only being one in existence that was sold to the president of Toys R Us for $13,000 at an auction back in around 2007. There's also a separate variant of Red Ransburg McQueen with some different decals, of which only 50 were made that were given out to members of the Mattel Cars team. The one-of-a-kind Red Ransburg McQueen was held at the Toys R Us headquarters in New Jersey. I'm not sure if it's still there, I'm not sure if that place even still exists. With the very rocky history of Toys R Us in America throughout the last few years, not too sure what the whereabouts of Red Ransburg McQueen are. If you guys know, definitely let me know in the comments. I'm not too sure on where this guy is, but hopefully he's still around, and hopefully he's okay. Car Finder. Car Finder was a DVD game, yeah, remember those? Released on certain copies of the Cars DVD. In the Car Finder game, you would go through the movie, and while watching it, have several characters that you would have to pick out and identify. Once you identified them, a full profile for the character would be unlocked, and you'd be able to learn about them. This is pretty notable for giving us a lot of the names of background characters and their descriptions in the early days of the Cars series, and it's pretty similar to the Meet the Cars book. Smell Swell. Smell Swell Deodorizer was what Lightning McQueen's sponsor was before he raced for Rust-eze. This was revealed in the World of Cars book in 2008. John Lasseter. Pixar's own former employee John Lasseter, who directed the first two Cars movies, named a character after himself. This yellow pickup truck, John Lasseter, is Jeff Gorvet's crew chief, referencing the fact that Lasseter and Jeff Gordon are friends in real life. In addition to being Jeff Gorvet's crew chief, John Lasseter also appears again at the end of the movie in Radiator Springs, which was confirmed by a diecast called Radiator Springs John Lasseter. He's in a different paint job here, but I believe this one that he appears in, the Radiator Springs paint job, is based off of a real truck that Lasseter owned. Crab. In Cars 3, while racing on Fireball Beach, Cruz stops because she says she doesn't want to hit a crab. This was seen as really odd, as all of the other animals throughout the Cars series are shown to be vehicles. The birds are vehicles, the bugs are vehicles, so on and so forth. People found it weird for her to just say a crab, it's not like a carified version of it. And even though we don't even see the crab on screen, it made a bunch of people start thinking that, well, crabs must exist, and if crabs exist, then that means that other animals that aren't vehicles exist, and that means that humans exist, and so on and so forth. But none of this is true, as a Cars 3 comic tie-in shows that the crab is in fact a vehicle, just like the other animals of the Cars series are. It's just still called a crab, just like how the bugs are still called bugs. 2017 mainline cancellations. History repeated itself in 2017 when the release of Cars 3 caused a bunch of diecasts from the first Cars movies to be cancelled. This included a mix of new releases and re-releases. However, following the release of Cars 3, starting in 2018, they've really made an effort to release these cancelled cars, both the new releases and the re-releases. While not every cancelled new release from 2017 has been released since, we're still waiting on quite a bunch of them, it is nice to see that they went back and they uncancelled a bunch of the cancelled cars once again. 2019 mainline cancellations. For unknown reasons, at the end of 2019, two whole waves of Cars diecasts were cancelled. These included several crew chiefs, the Hot Rod variants of River Scott and Luis Nash, Sweet Tea's Band, and several tractors, as well as a few Piston Cup legends. Luckily, once again, Mattel pulled through, and 2021 has seen the uncancellation of the majority of these canceled cars, with the Hot Rod variants, Sweet Tea's Band, and several others. Although the tractors that we've gotten this year are different than the ones that were canceled back in 2019, which is kind of weird. Zill. Zill was Cars 2's original antagonist, taking on the role that later basically became Professor Z. He was based off of a failed 1950s Soviet car. Julia. Julia is a car who goes hand in hand with Zill, our last entry. She was an Italian spy who was going to have the role that later became that of Holly Shiftwell in Cars 2. But, unlike Holly, Julia was actually going to be a double agent, secretly working for the villain Zill the whole time. International Rochelle. There are 11 different versions of the character Rochelle from Planes, with each one being from a different country based off of which version of the movie you're watching. This is pretty similar to the World Grand Prix Tokyo Party changes. But Rochelle is a major character who's in several scenes of the Planes movie, and I really don't know why they changed her nationality for each version of the movie, or specifically 11 different versions. In the American cut, we know her as a Canadian racer, but in the Australian cut, she's an Australian racer. In the French cut, I believe she's a French racer. In the Japanese version, she's a Japanese racer, so on and so forth. Heck, her French version even got its own alternate diecast, which I'd assume was released over in France. I really don't know why this was done, and it's always confused me, so if you know the reason, definitely let me know in the comments. Jeremy Clarkson's Harv. Jeremy Clarkson is a British announcer and the host of several different car shows throughout the years. Most notably, he hosted BBC's show Top Gear from 2002 all the way through 2015. Clarkson also had a cameo in the first Cars movie. Not really a cameo, he had a full role, playing Harv, Lightning McQueen's agent, but only in the British version of the movie. Outside of the UK, in the American version of the movie, Harv was voiced by Jeremy Piven, who actually went uncredited. But this actually won't be the last time you hear about Top Gear on today's video. Luigi's Flying Tires. Luigi's Flying Tires is one of Cars Land's opening day attractions. A hovering, air hockey-esque bumper cars attraction where you and another person were both seated in a giant tire and you could go around and bump into people. This idea was a revival of an older Disneyland ride that was made back in the 50s when the park first opened, called the Flying Saucers. However, this ride had constant issues and was shut down pretty quickly. Nearly 60 years later, this concept was revisited with Luigi's Flying Tires, but they still just couldn't get it right, even with almost 60 years worth of innovations. Yeah, it seems that this concept was just not meant to be. Luigi's Flying Tires just didn't work out as a ride. It's pretty boring. And then they had the smart idea to start giving you beach balls to throw around in this bumper car ride, so you could just straight up chuck beach balls at people. Luigi's Flying Tires, not a great concept. And the ride was quickly shut down after only 4 years of operation, with a replacement, Luigi's Rollickin' Roadsters, being put in 2016, which is still there to this day. I plan to do a whole video going in depth on the history of this ride in the future, but seriously, whose idea was it to put giant beach balls in a bumper car ride so that you're not only hitting the other vehicle, you could also just chuck stuff at each other? Like, who approved that? Wrong Color Ryan. This is one of the, if not the most well-known animation errors in the entire Cars series. During the Florida 500 crash segment, when Ryan inside Laney is hit, he's actually shown with an alternative color scheme. For whatever reason, his colors are completely wrong for just this shot. I'd assume it was probably some sort of rendering error, but I'm not sure. Diecast's not in the movie. Every year, the Cars Diecast mainline focuses around releasing cars that appeared in the 3 Cars films. There are also sidelines that will sometimes focus on other aspects of the Cars universe, like some of the holiday books or the Cars tunes, and then there are cars that are not from the movies that were made for the diecast line that are usually character variants, such as the TROC or XRS cars. But over the years, there have been several cars released in the main line that actually never appeared in the Cars movies. Probably the most notable of these are many of the haulers. A bunch of the haulers that were released by Mattel did not appear in the Cars movie, more specifically their cabs. While we see the back of the majority of the haulers in the first Cars movie, we don't really see the front of any aside from Mac, Chick Hicks's hauler, and the King's hauler. However, Mattel has made several hauler cabs for the other haulers that we only see the backs of, oftentimes even naming them. There are also many crew chiefs and pitties for the Piston Cup that we didn't see in the movie but have been made as diecast. And the same is true for the Rusty's Racing Center trainees. Quite a few of these guys cannot be found in the movie, although I believe the majority of them were there. A few, like Tom W., were nowhere to be found in the movie, or at least people still haven't found them. And some of the most famous, most well-known ones are pretty recent ones. Hot Rod Smokey, who did not appear in Cars 3 despite the other Hot Rod legends appearing, and Hot Rod Steve Herschel, who also did not appear, and people have no idea why he exists, myself included. Dex Dynaco. Making his only appearance in Heavy Metal Mater, Dex Dynaco owns Dynaco Records, the record label that signs on Heavy Metal Mater. Dex looks identical to Tex Dynaco, except painted red. Their diecasts even have the same license plate, which is not legal. But yeah, Dex Dynaco is basically Heavy Metal Mater's version of Tex Dynaco. But whether or not he exists in the actual Cars universe in the real canon is unknown. If Mater was just making up this guy who is similar to Tex Dynaco and owns a record company instead of an oil company, or if there's actually a music producer out there named Dex Dynaco who owns a Dynaco Records subdivision of the Dynaco company, or maybe a completely separate from Tex Dynaco's Dynaco. I'd assume the two are probably related, maybe brothers, cousins. I don't know, but I thought he deserved to be on this iceberg for being pretty interesting. Vitaly Petrov in Cars 2 credits. Vitaly Petrov, the Russian racer from the Russian cut of Cars 2, actually appears in all versions of the movie, as he appears on a postcard from Russia in the Cars 2 credits. SNL Cars 4. Owen Wilson, pretty recently in late 2021, was the celebrity guest star in an episode of Saturday Night Live. In this episode, one of the segments he did had him in a recording booth voicing Lightning McQueen lines for a supposed fictional Cars 4. It's Saturday Night Live. The whole thing is just a parody, obviously. Cancelled Planes. The Planes diecast line was cancelled in 2016, but there were a lot of plans to continue it. There are an absolute ton of planes that were cancelled that are known, that there are images for. Unfortunately, there are too many for me to list off here, but there were some really great ones, including a lot of major characters like other versions of Sparky, finally, who for whatever reason was only available in the Vitaminimalch 3-pack, and even that was like a slightly different variant of him, as well as a bunch of other really cool cars. Nick Lupin Lopez, unfortunately, got canceled, and he would have been awesome. There were so many great planes that got canceled. Tokyo Mater cars in Cars 2. This one is a pretty well-known one, mainly because of the diecast line. Several of the cars from Tokyo Mater, Kabuto, Chisaki, Yokoza, and a few others, all cameo on a bridge in the Tokyo party scene in Cars 2. And some of them also appear at some other points as well. Suki shows up during the You Might Think montage. I'm not sure if any other ones do, though. But anyway, as I was saying before, this cameo would probably stay pretty unknown if the Cars diecast line didn't constantly keep on re-releasing the cars from this scene as Cars 2 diecasts. The interesting thing about all of them being there, though, is that it adds to the validity of the Cars 2 and Tokyo Mater actually having happened. These characters exist, so maybe the Tokyo Mater story actually happened. Or maybe Mater knew of these guys and made up a story. We'll never know. Allianz. Allianz is a financial service company based in Germany, and they had a tie-in promotion with Cars 3. There's a commercial where Lightning's spoiler starts coming off in the middle of a race, and this pitty, whose name is Freddy, comes and puts it back on. Definitely interesting. It was fully animated and everything. It's actually very high quality, like movie level animation for just this German financial service commercial. Unfortunately, the commercial is not in English, but if you don't speak German, you can still get a pretty good gist of it. Zebra Mater PSA. This refers to a Russian road safety PSA released to tie in with Cars 2 in 2011. It stars a pitty named Misha, who crosses the street with the help of Mater, who is strangely painted to look like a zebra. This is in reference to the black and white striped crosswalks in Russia. Once again, this PSA was not released in English and is certainly pretty interesting. TROC Frosty. While most Cars fans are probably very familiar with the Transcontinental Race of Champions toy line, which created specialized variants of the World Grand Prix racers from Cars 2, not as many may be familiar with the TROC versions of Frosty Winterbottom. Frosty was Jeff Gorvet's replacement in the Australian version of Cars 2, appearing instead of Jeff Gordon in the Tokyo party scene, which we covered earlier. And surprisingly enough, Frosty got a TROC variant for nearly every series. He got a neon variant, an ice racer variant, and a carbon racer variant, as well as a silver variant. But these variants are pretty rare now, and pretty obscure because they were only ever released in Australia. This was not done for any of the other racers that appeared in the international versions of Cars 2. The Russian racer did get an ice racer variant, but that was released worldwide. Frosty's, though, stayed exclusive only to Australia, which is certainly pretty weird. Lost commercial. All the way back in November of 2006, a Walmart commercial advertising the Cars Geared Up 2-disc DVD pack was released. The commercial featured Wally the Walmart hauler meeting Mater, saying he recognizes him from somewhere, but he can't quite figure out where he recognizes him from. As he says this, they drive by several different advertisements for the Cars movie with Mater on them. This was seen as a piece of lost media until it was actually found and uploaded to YouTube in 2020. However, I believe that it's since been lost again. I wasn't able to find it while researching the video. I do have a screenshot of it. I've actually never seen the commercial. I'm actually reading a plot summary that I found online, but yeah, I don't think it's been archived, unfortunately. I believe it's since been removed from YouTube, which is really unfortunate. The interesting thing about this, though, is that I believe it might be the only ever actual appearance of Wally the Walmart hauler, whose diecast we've seen released literally like every year for over a decade now, but he's actually using a different design than his diecast, a design based off of some older Walmart haulers that were being used at the time. You could actually see this design on the box of some of the earlier releases of Wally, and on the thumbnail for this video. Wow, look at that. Sarah Safe Street. One of the most infamous moments in Cars 2 was when Mater sings his own rendition of the jingle for the State Farm Insurance Company. This was done as part of a cross-promotion between Cars 2 and State Farm, and there was a State Farm Cars 2 crossover ad featuring a character named Sarah Safe Street, who's an insurance agent. In this ad, Mater crashes into a pet store. That's right, a pet store full of a bunch of vehicles, little small cars and planes, which are hamsters and birds. It's really weird. After Mater crashes into the pet store, Sarah tells Mater that it's okay, you can't always be prepared for an accident, and several State Farm pitties come in to help out. Rodney the Rocker. Rodney the Rocker was a diecast released in 2010, a background fan from the heavy metal Mater Cars tune. However, the Rodney the Rocker diecast looks nothing like the car who is claimed to be Rodney the Rocker on the screenshot used on the packaging. In fact, Rodney's diecast has never been seen in the heavy metal Mater short. Nobody has found any cars that are an exact match to Rodney. So, the deal with this car is still completely unknown. Why does he look nothing like the car they use on the image? Was he based off of a character from the Cars tune, or was he just an original design? Nobody knows to this day, unfortunately. Ferraris can't be legally released. In 1999, Mattel made a 15-year deal with Ferrari to make Ferrari-themed merchandise in their toy lines such as Hot Wheels and several others. Once these 15 years were up in 2014, they decided not to renew, and to this day, Mattel cannot make any Ferrari-themed merchandise. This not only affected Hot Wheels, but even affected the Disney Cars diecast line. As a Ferrari appears in the first Cars movie, Ferrari F430, and Luigi and Guido are shown wearing Ferrari memorabilia. The Ferrari fan Luigi and Guido diecasts, as well as the Ferrari F430 diecast, have not been released since 2014 and now cannot be legally re-released. A really interesting case and a pretty unique one within the Cars diecast line. World of Cars Online. World of Cars Online was a very short-lived online multiplayer game that only ran from 2010 to 2012. In it, players could create their own Cars character and race around Radiator Springs alongside other players and AI. I never got the chance to play this game. For whatever reason, it never worked with my computer. I'd love to do another video going into it more in depth. If you guys ever played World of Cars Online, definitely let me know in the comments. I'd love to hear some stories about it. Demolition Derby female racers. In Cars 3, several of the racers in the Thunder Hollow Demolition Derby were actually female. However, the diecasts for them did not include the black eyeliner lines that they had on in the movie, which has confused several people to this day as to what the gender of the characters is supposed to be. Female racers in the Demolition Derby include Airborne, APB, Blind Spot, Broadside, Sig Alert, High Impact, Jambalaya Chimichanga, Liability, of course Miss Fritter, Patty, who does have a speaking line in the movie, as does APB, and finally Tailgate. Batmobile in Cars 3. An early version of Cars 3 featured Lightning going to a celebrity party. This celebrity party would be full of a bunch of famous cars that we would all recognize from movies and our real world. This scene would include famous cars such as the Ecto-1 from Ghostbusters, and probably most famously, the Batmobile. There was supposed to be a scene in which the old Batmobile, the Batmobile from the 1966 Adam West TV series, argued with the new Batmobile, which was to be the Tumbler from the Christian Bale Dark Knight trilogy. Now, concept art for this celebrity party scene does exist. It's what I'm showing on screen right now. The Batmobile image I used on the thumbnail is actually just fan art. There's not like a good enough image of these two Batmobiles in the movie that I could have used for the thumbnail, but I would have absolutely loved to have seen this scene. Unfortunately, the story moved past including that scene. As the story, was reworked again and again, that scene was eventually dropped. Probably would have been a legal nightmare to do anyway, but I would have loved to have seen it. 2005 trailer. In 2005, a teaser trailer was released for Cars, and the movie looks insanely different than the final product. Although the trailer starts off with Lightning and Mater animated as we see them in the final version of the movie, it then cuts to racing footage where almost all of the racers look completely different than they did in the original movie. They all have completely different designs, sponsors, and numbers, and the animation is all around far worse looking. It is a really odd trailer. Nancy and John. While in Paris in Cars 2, Mater passes by two cars kissing on a bridge. These cars are named Nancy and John and are actually a reference to John Lasseter and his wife Nancy, who, whenever they went to Paris, would stand at the center of that bridge and kiss. Nancy and John appeared once again in Cars 3 while Lightning is channel surfing on Mac, still kissing on that same bridge. Other World Grand Prix flag wavers. Most Cars fans are probably well aware of Eric Langley, the Honda that waves the flag in the World Grand Prix, who's been released year after year for the diecast line. But what many might not know is that Eric Langley actually isn't the only flag waver in the World Grand Prix, as each race has its own flag waver. Eric Langley, the Honda, is the flag waver for the Tokyo race, a Fiat is the flag waver for the Italy race, and a Mini Cooper is the flag waver for the London race. Unfortunately, to this day, those other two are pretty much forgotten about, and Eric Langley is the only one who has a name or any sort of merchandise. Although there have been two occasions in 2012 and 2017 where Eric was given artwork for the Fiat flag waver instead of his own by accident. Here's hoping that one day the Fiat and Mini Cooper get names and diecasts of their own. Racing number changes. Although the majority of Piston Cup sponsors kept the same numbers going into Cars 3 that they had in the first Cars, quite a few had their numbers changed. All of the cars that were voiced by real-world racers had their sponsors' number changed to reflect their real-world numbers at the time. This even applied to their veteran counterparts who were not voiced by cameos. Meanwhile, Easy Idol had its sponsor number changed from 51 in the first Cars to 15 in Cars 3, since by the end of the movie, Cruz would take on the 51 number. And you can't have two cars with the same number, which is a mistake that Pixar made in the first Cars movie when both Revolting and Apple had the number 84. So for Cars 3, Revolting's number was switched to be 48. That way, Apple could keep its number as 84, a reference to the year that the first Mac was released. Lightning League. Cars Lightning League was a mobile game released for Cars 3, and it's not very good. Like, at all. Sorry. A sort of endless runner style game, except it's not really endless, the levels have ends. This game was released to tie in with Cars 3, and has you play as several cars and several levels, including several characters from Cars 3 and DJ, for who knows what reason, collecting blueprints to unlock more. Being a modern mobile game, it was absolutely ridden with ads and was really low quality compared to the previous Cars mobile game Fast as Lightning, which really was a very well-made game in my opinion. Mater made up Cars 2. This is a fan theory slash more of like a personal headcanon for some people, that the events of Cars 2 with Mater's whole spy adventure were all made up. This was inspired by the fact that we see Mater retelling the events of Cars 2 as a tall tale at the end of the movie. However, we of course know in the movie that it wasn't a tall tale, it was true. Finn and Holly come in, they speak to Mater, there are several scenes with them afterwards, and the events of Cars 2 and characters from it are referenced in several pieces of media that came out after it. But some people who didn't like Cars 2 choose to just believe this as a personal headcanon. Lewis Revington. Lewis Revington was the original name for Cars 2 racer Lewis Hamilton. He actually had a pretty different design than the final version of Lewis, although his model was the same. He was originally gray with a Union Jack logo on him, a design that actually later on went to be used for Prince William in the final version of Cars 2. Instead of racing for both England and Grenada, he was supposed to only be racing for England. Again, in the final version of the movie, Lewis Hamilton is racing for two countries, while Nigel Gearsley is the sole racer for England. It's unknown how far into production Lewis Revington was changed into Lewis Hamilton, but there actually are pictures of a Lewis Revington diecast which was to be included with the launcher. Of course, eventually this was not released, and instead Lewis Hamilton with a launcher was put out instead. Definitely pretty interesting. Lost Forest in Radiator Springs 500 and a half. In the Cars Toon episode Radiator Springs 500 and a half, Lightning and a few other racers do an off-road race in the surrounding area around Radiator Springs. At one point, they get lost and eventually end up in a forest full of a bunch of dead, rotting away cars. This forest was originally actually supposed to be in the first Cars movie and can be seen in a deleted scene on the DVD called Lost. Sludgy. Chick Hicks is iconically completely covered in different sponsor stickers. While most of these are ones that have piston cup racers for them, such as Shiny Wax, Octane Gain, Gasprin, or Vitaline, there are quite a few stickers on his side that are for sponsors that don't actually have a racer. Probably the most well-known of these is Sludgy, but there are a few others if you take a close look at Chick Hicks. It's unknown why these sponsors have stickers on his sides when we don't have a racer for them. Sort of makes sense, but it's kind of odd because we've never seen anything else of Sludgy or these other companies in the Cars universe. Rev and Go Racer. In 2017, right before the release of Cars 3, Mattel released the Desert Race 11 pack, which included two exclusive cars, Todd Marcus, the No-Stall Racer, and Rev and Go Racer. Their name is just Rev and Go Racer. While every other Cars 3 veteran and next-gen racer was given a name, aside from the veteran Apple car who doesn't have any merchandise, so there's not really a way they would give him a name, Rev and Go Racer stands as the odd one out, not having a name. And while most of the other veteran racers, including Todd Marcus, who is also new for that pack, have been re-released in other forms, unfortunately, Rev and Go Racer is still waiting for his or her time in the spotlight. Truck name Easter eggs. Several of the delivery trucks that appear throughout the first Cars movie have abbreviations on them, which in-universe are, of course, the companies they work for, but in real life, to us, they're actually Easter eggs referencing different Pixar movies. Some of these include TS on Dustin Mellows for Toy Story, FN on Miles Meat Truck Malone for Finding Nemo, I Ink on Chet Boxcar with the I from The Incredibles and the ink from Monsters Inc., and most interestingly is the one on Oliver Lightload. In the movie, Oliver had an FN on him just like Miles, but for his diecast, it was actually changed to one for a moving company called Up, referencing Pixar's Up even having the house being lifted by balloons as part of the arrow shape formed by the U. Oliver's diecast was released in 2010, and Up was released in 2009, so it was interesting that they changed how he was supposed to look to make it a reference to something more recent. Miles in Cars 3. The antagonist of Cars 2, Miles Axelrod, actually cameos in Cars 3 in a framed image in Sterling's office. Also in a framed image is Roger, the rocket that takes Mater to the moon in Moon Mater, and there's another Easter egg in his office with a gold version of Cinderella's carousel from Disney's Cinderella, of course. These are definitely some odd characters to have framed images of, but Sterling wasn't really the nicest guy, so having a Miles Axelrod photo in the back of his room kind of gives you some red flags early on, huh? Rollin' in the Rear View. Rollin' in the Rear View is actually the name of the song that plays when DJ Boost, Wingo, and Snotrod first drive up to Mac in the first Cars movie. When they're doing all those shots of all the tuners and all their modifications, that's the song playing. Lego Rod Redline. I'm not really going to fully go into this one because I actually did a whole separate video on it. I'll link that in the card. Hopefully I remember to do that. Please remember to do that, me, when I upload this video. Anyway, in 2011, promoting Cars 2 a few months after it came out, Toys R Us held a special building event where you could put together a Lego Rod Torque Redline. Lego Rod Torque Redline is notably of a far lower quality than the rest of the Cars Lego sets. His eyes and decals are actually all stickers compared to the prints used for the rest of the line, and he just uses a much, much simpler build. Definitely looks nowhere near as good as the other Cars Lego sets. Pretty interesting though, as the building event only lasted for one day. But again, if you want to learn more about that, definitely check out my full video on it. I go way more in depth on the whole event and stuff like that. Peter Racinov. Peter Racinov was a DLC character in the mobile game Cars Fast as Lightning. He's a Russian racer that looks very similar to all of the other World Grand Prix racers that were in the alternate versions of the movie. He's a Max Schnell repaint and all that. But he actually didn't appear in Cars 2. Peter Racinov was created exclusively for Cars Fast as Lightning. Why the Russian racer from the Russian version of Cars 2, Vitaly Petrov, who later appeared in the Ice Racers toy line, wasn't used and Peter was created instead is unknown. But Peter's only appearance to date is in Cars Fast as Lightning, and he's received no merchandise. DJ's Dance and Drive. DJ's Dance and Drive was a dance show that would occasionally occur in Cars Land from its opening in 2012 all the way through to 2019. It would feature DJ, who was a giant animatronic car, driving around, and then he would stop, he'd be attended to by some waitresses from the Flo's restaurant, and he would play a bunch of music and they would all dance and invite the audience to dance with them. This is something that I've considered doing a full video on because I just find it so interesting. It's a DJ dance party show where he plays such classics as Party Rock Anthem, Good Feeling by Flo Rida, and DJ's Got Us Falling in Love, a song that's probably far more famous due to its Minecraft parody at this point. After the show was shut down in 2019, a very similar show started in Disney World instead, outside of the Lightning McQueen's Racing Academy show ride. I don't know how to describe that. But yeah, once again, I might do a full video going through this because I find it really interesting. But as far as Disney Parks dance shows go, it doesn't hold a candle against the Star Wars Galactic Dance-Off. I'm sorry, I can and will use any time I possibly can to reference the fact that that existed. It's too amazing. Dancing with the Stars. Not to be confused with the 2021 Disney Plus Pixar popcorn short Dancing with the Cars. Dancing with the Stars is a dance show that's appeared on ABC for several years now. In 2017, during their Disney Night episode, they had a couple dance to the song Ride, which is played at the end of Cars 3. This was done in promotion for Cars 3, which was just a few weeks away from release at the time the episode aired. This was actually the first ever time the song Ride was performed. This was like the official reveal of the song, and the singer of the song, ZZ Ward, even appeared live on the show to sing the song. This is another thing I actually have a full separate video on. It's one of my favorite videos, so if you're interested, definitely make sure to check it out. Lightning versus the Stig. In 2018, the LEGO and Top Gear YouTube channels both released an animated LEGO short where Lightning McQueen races against Top Gear's The Stig. Now, I'm really not all that familiar with Top Gear. It's far more popular in the UK than it is over here in the States, but from what I can gather, the Stig is this mysterious racer character who wears like a white motorcycle suit with a black visor. This is represented in the short by having the carified version of the Stig not actually have a mouth and have a black visor for his eyes, again representing the whole motorcycle helmet thing. He also doesn't speak throughout the short. While the Stig doesn't speak for character reasons, the rest of the short is actually voice acted with Lightning, Mater, and Cruz in it. But why is this made with Legos? Well, not really with Legos. Why is this a CGI animation using Lego models of characters? Honestly, it's kind of odd, as no LEGO car sets were released in 2018, and LEGO Top Gear, isn't a thing, really. Top Gear wanted to have LEGO sets. They had a good business relationship with LEGO, clearly, as you can tell from this video. They released a keychain of the Stig and proposed an idea of having Top Gear tie-in LEGO sets, but to this day, there still aren't any. Except for this more recently released Technic set that came out a few years after that video was posted, leaving this video as just a total oddity of the Cars, LEGO, and Top Gear franchises. Mike and Sully in Tokyo. Mike and Sully both cameo in Tokyo Mater for a very brief few seconds when Mater is chased through a restaurant. You can see Mike and Sully just hanging out by the door. I don't know why this was done. This is a really weird Easter egg, but it's probably a reference to the sushi restaurant Harryhausen's that they go to in Monsters, Inc. MSOS and Cars Tunes. The Motor Speedway of the South, the stadium where the Dynaco 400 was held in the first Cars movie, as well as a race in Cars 3, was actually used in several of the Cars tunes. It was where Mater performed his stunts in Mater the Greater, where he performed his song in Heavy Metal Mater, and where he had his final wrestling match in Monster Truck Mater. Cars VHS. This is something I want to do a full video on in the future, but Cars was the final Disney movie, final Pixar movie, to be released on VHS. Everything afterwards was DVD or Blu-ray. Because of this, the Cars VHS has become quite the collector's item, becoming really rare now. Planes 3. In early 2013, a few months before the movie came out, El Chupacabra's voice actor said that the Planes series would be a trilogy. And later on in October of 2013, a member of Disney said that Planes 3 was put into early development. I always found it really surprising that Planes 2 came out literally 1 year after the first Planes movie, so I guess I shouldn't be surprised that Planes 3 was already being worked on that early on as well. But any news on Planes 3 ceased after that point. The Planes series is not looked back on too fondly critically. It's basically been forgotten about, like I said earlier on in the video, and Disney Toon Studios, who made the Planes series, was shut down in 2018, so seeing a continuation of Planes is almost definitely never going to happen at this point, unfortunately, for people who are fans of the series. Space. At D23 Expo in 2017, John Lasseter revealed the next movie in the Cars franchise after Cars 3, by saying a movie was in early development featuring a scene of two planes that were flying, quote, to the edge of the atmosphere, end quote. It was being developed by Disney Toon Studios with the code name or working title Space. However, Space was cancelled when Disney Toon Studios was shut down the following year. This movie definitely seems interesting, and hopefully someday we can get some more information about what was planned for it. It seems really interesting. Was it going to be about rockets? Was it going to be about planes going into space? Were there going to be like alien cars? I don't know, and it's definitely something I should try to find out more about. 2006 Cars prototypes. The back of the packaging of the original Cars diecasts include these strange images. These are the original prototypes for the Cars diecasts, and they're pretty different from what we got. After 2006, they stopped being used with the exception of DJ, whose original 2006 prototype image, for whatever reason, is still used on card backs to this day. Disney Infinity Premium figure. Now, this is another thing that I have a full video on, so once again, I'm not going to fully get into it here, but Disney Infinity was a Toys to Life game that Disney made from 2013 to 2016. It had 3 different editions, 1.0, 2.0, and 3.0, and had a whole cast of Disney, Pixar, Marvel, and Star Wars characters. Included in this were some of the Cars characters. And before the game was canceled, they had plans to make bigger figures, which they would call premium figures. These figures would be absolutely massive. The figures would light up when placed on the base, and the characters in-game would have different updated movesets. Now, since the game was canceled, all of these premium figures were canceled, and one of them was a premium figure of Lightning McQueen. But the interesting thing with him is that Lightning's premium figure was actually canceled before the rest of the premium figures were. It seems he was canceled at one point in production, and they still went on with planning to make the rest of the premium figures, and then the whole line was canceled. Brent in Cars 3. Originally, announcer character Brent Mustangburger, who made his debut in Cars 2, and actually appeared in both Planes movies, was supposed to appear once again in Cars 3. It seems that he was cut pretty late in production, as he was supposed to even have a Cars 3 version of his diecast released in 2017, but it was cancelled. Now, it's unknown how large Brent's role would have been, although I do remember hearing that he was supposed to take the place of Bob Cutlass, which would definitely be weird as Bob and Daryl were the 2 commentators in the first Cars. It would be kind of weird to have Bob no longer be there at the Piston Cup in Cars 3, so I'm glad that he was still in the movie. But yeah, not really sure about how large Brent's role would have been or if he really would have replaced Bob, but there you go. Mater's Bricktails. Mater's Bricktails was a set of 3 different LEGO Cars shorts released back in 2011 on the official LEGO Cars website. They all starred Mater going on different adventures, and I remember them pretty vividly. They're like a pretty vivid childhood memory of mine. Honestly, I think they've been pretty forgotten in all of my years of doing Cars-themed YouTube videos and being part of the online Cars community. I don't think I've ever heard anybody bring these up, so if you guys remember them, yeah, definitely make sure to let me know in the comments. Pretty sure you could find at least one of the shorts on YouTube still. LMA Stunt Show. This is another one I want to talk about in the future because I love discussing closed-down Disney attractions. I've written it down as LMA so that it can fit on the Iceberg because there's a lot on this layer, but it stands for the Lights, Motors, Action Stunt Show, a stunt show that used to run in Disney Hollywood Studios that at one point included a section where Lightning McQueen fought off a lemon. The Lights, Motors, Action Stunt Show has since been shut down due to that area of the park being removed to make way for Star Wars Galaxy's Edge. The Video Game Racers. Cars the video game features several different Piston Cup races full of a bunch of racers. But none of these racers are the same as the Piston Cup racers that appear in the movies. For starters, they all have different shapes, different names, which are only first names, and they all have different numbers as well. Also, not all Piston Cup racers and sponsors were represented in the video game. This is kind of a weird spot in the Cars canon, and one of the main things going against the concept of the video games being canon. Personally, as someone who likes to think that the video games are canon, I just kind of ignore this. Look, okay, the Cars canon isn't going to be as tightly knit as, like, the MCU, you know? There are going to be things that don't line up, there often are, and it's perfectly fine in my opinion. Waxy Wax. Shiny Wax is a sponsor that appears all throughout the Cars series. but its name has appeared as Waxy Wax on more than one occasion. It appears as Waxy Wax on a box in Doc's garage in the first Cars, and it appears in the credits of Cars 3, and there might be some other times it appears that I'm not as aware of. It's assumed by fans that in universe, Shiny Wax used to be known as Waxy Wax and eventually changed their name to Shiny Wax. The behind the scenes reason for the two different names, though, is unknown. Z and the Cars 3 credits. During the credits of Cars 3, a strange looking logo with what seems to be the letter Z in the middle of it appears. Now, I have no idea what this is. I'm not sure if anyone knows. If you guys have any ideas for what this Z means or represents, definitely leave them in the comments. It's always been my assumption, and I think several other people have assumed that it's a reference to Professor Z from Cars 2 in some capacity. I think it looks a little similar to some logos on him, I believe. But yeah, not 100% sure on what this means. And I made the Iceberg, so it was my choice to put this on here. It's just kind of a weird, mysterious thing, I think. DJ and Tokyo Mater. Maybe this shouldn't be this far down on the iceberg, or heck, maybe it shouldn't even be on it at all, but it took me a very long time to realize this. When I say DJ and Tokyo Mater, no, I'm not referring to the fact that DJ drives into Radiator Springs at the beginning of the short. I'm referencing the fact that he actually appears in Tokyo, the only one of the tuners to do so. DJ appears at the very end of the short during the Drift Party, Dance Party segment. He's the one playing the music. Living Roomba. Guys, we need to talk about the fact that there's a living Roomba in the Cars universe. Okay, we just need to talk about it. In Planes, Fire, and Rescue, there's a character named Don, or Don, who appears very briefly at the Grand Fusel Lodge. He's a living Roomba. Yeah. He's a Roomba with eyes. He's alive. And the concept of the fact that he is alive is sheerly terrifying to me. Okay? The Roombas in the Cars universe are alive. How cruel must it be to live in a world where you could be a race car, you could be an airplane, you could be a truck, you could be whatever, but no, you're born as a Roomba with eyes. That's just like, I don't know, but something's not right about that. Missing sponsors in the Cars 3 credits. Yet another odd thing in the Cars 3 credits. Several different Piston Cup sponsor logos appear at one point in the credits, but which version of the logo is used is very inconsistent. Some sponsors use their Cars 1 logo, some use their Piston Cup Veteran logo, some use their Next Gen logo, and, like I said earlier, Shiny Wax uses the Waxy Wax logo. But, strangely, also in the credits are several of the removed sponsors that didn't make it into Cars 3. The logos for companies like Fiber Fuel and Retread, who didn't have racers in Cars 3, appear alongside these other sponsors that did. Disney on Ice. Several Cars characters have been used in Disney on Ice shows. They're these giant built cars that drive around on the ice on stage. It's really impressive. I don't really have much to say. I don't know that much about these, and it's something that I might do a full video on in the future. But yeah, several different Disney on Ice shows feature appearances by giant, life-sized Cars characters that go around on the ice. Really impressive. Sarge and Lightning in Planes 2. Both Sarge and Lightning McQueen appear very briefly in images in Planes, Fire, and Rescue. Sarge is a bit easier to spot, being shown with the character Mayday in Mayday's garage in a framed photo, while meanwhile, a picture of Lightning's Cars 2 design very, very briefly appears on a newspaper that Sparky is seen holding at the beginning of the movie. Censored Ciao Francesco. In 2014, Mattel released a die-cast called Ciao Francesco, which is based off of the scene when Lightning first meets Francesco at the Tokyo party. This was a super chase, meaning only a few thousand units were produced, and its unique feature is having the words Ciao McQueen written on his back like Francesco reveals to have in the movie. Also with Francesco at that scene in the movie is a martini glass, but for the die-cast, this was actually replaced with an all-in-all can. That's right, they censored it. Now, I highly doubt Francesco was drinking alcohol of any kind. I mean, he's a car, right? They drink fuel, so, like, what's the deal there? I just find this really interesting because it's one of very few cases of censorship in the Cars series. Also, side note, this censorship makes no sense because several other cars released for Cars 2 around the same time as this Francesco also featured martini glasses, so, like, what's the deal? Lightning lists the wrong number of racers. It's a classic line. At the beginning of the first Cars, Lightning McQueen goes, 1 winner, 42 losers. I eat losers for breakfast. And no, Lightning McQueen is a cannibal did not make its way onto this iceberg. But, anyway, this has bothered me for years. Lightning says 1 winner and 42 losers, suggesting that there are 43 racers in the Piston Cup, but there aren't. There are only 36. From what I've been told, this choice was made because there are a total of 43 racers in NASCAR, so they went with that instead of saying, the accurate number of racers who are there. The same thing happened in Cars 3 as well, unfortunately. He still says 42 losers. There are not 42 racers. There are a few more racers in Cars 3 than there are in the first movie, but still not 42. Where is Snot Rod? In Tokyo Mater, we see DJ Boost and Wingo all speed through Radiator Springs, but Snot Rod is missing. He most likely wasn't included due to the fact that he's actually not a car from Japan. While DJ Boost and Wingo are all Japanese tuner cars, Snot Rod is an American muscle car from the 60s. So, since this was Tokyo Mater, I guess it was decided not to include Snot Rod for that reason. At least, that's what most people say in regards to why Snot Rod wasn't there. That's also why Snot Rod doesn't have, his own Tokyo Mater variant. You know how there are all the cars based off of the tuners, like Komodo, or Yokozo, or Kabuto? Well, Snot Rod doesn't have one of those, once again, because he's actually an American car. Or rather, his model is an American car. Reused designs from Mater National. Several background characters in Tokyo Mater have very similar appearances to characters from Cars Mater National. Tokyo Mater's Manji looks just like Otto from Mater National. Tokyo Mater's Cho looks just like Emma from Mater National. And Tokyo Mater's Tibinyu looks just like Koji from Mater National. Why was this done? Just like most confusing things on the iceberg, nobody knows. Mater's birthday. Mater's passport appears in the credits of Cars 2 and states that his birthday is January 12th, 1957. This is a reference to John Lasseter, who was born on the exact same day in the exact same year. World Grand Prix Fabrizio. According to some early concept art, as well as the Cars 2 mega poster, it seems that Fabrizio, a character who very briefly appears in Cars 2 as a celebrity in Porto Corsa, was originally supposed to compete in the World Grand Prix. This is actually yet another thing that I have a full separate video on. Petrov is Grem. Petrov Trunkov is a very obscure lemon from Cars 2. To this day, people still debate where he even appeared in the movie. Despite just how obscure he is, though, he's gotten quite a bit of merchandise, all of it coming out right after Cars 2, or right around the time it was being released. His diecast was released very early on in the diecast line for Cars 2, which is odd because of just how minor he is. But this, when paired up with some concept art that shows Petrov Trunkov in the airport fighting Cars 2, having something done to him that's done to Grem in the final version of the movie, seems to reveal that at one point, Petrov Trunkov's role was going to be that of Grem in the movie before Grem replaced him. Varoom. Now this is one that I actually didn't know about. A 95 fan suggested that I put it on here. I did some research and now I'm very confused. Rev & Go is a sponsor that appears all throughout the Cars series, but in the Car Finder game, when you click on the Rev & Go hauler, the side of the hauler doesn't say Rev & Go, and instead says Varoom. So it seems that early on, Rev & Go was to be called Varoom. Charge-Ups. Charge-Ups was a line of cars released in 2011 by Mattel. They were plastic cars that could be charged up if you bought a charger that was sold separately. They would then race around on their own for a very short amount of time before you would have to charge them up again. They released a couple of World Grand Prix racers in this series, as well as a playset, and it's become a pretty obscure Cars diecast line spin-off series. VIN Racers. Okay, so this next one is kind of terrifying. The implications it has are kind of disturbing. In the Cars Race-O-Rama video game, after being beaten by McQueen several times, Chick Hicks's racing students go to this factory where they're turned into these robot cars called VIN cars. They are now painted in all white. They have a barcode on their side. They have these robotic voices. VIN, by the way, stands for Vehicle Identification Number, so they don't even have, like, names anymore. Basically, these cars have been turned into full-out robots, and they were previously, like, regular living cars. The implications that this has for the rest of the Cars universe is just kind of terrifying. Top-down truck stop in Cars 3. In Cars 3, during the King's Highway sequence, as Lightning and Mac are traveling to the Rusty's Racing Center, you can at one point see a sign for the top-down truck stop. This is the exact same truck stop that Mac wanted to rest at in the first movie. It also appeared as a place where Mater performed with his band at the beginning of Heavy Metal Mater, where Mia and Tia were waitresses, which was actually a reference to the original version of the scene where Mac would actually lose Lightning when stopping at the truck stop, and Mia and Tia would be waitresses there. Turtle and Cubby. These two are some of the most obscure characters in the entire Cars series, and are probably the most obscure characters to be named in the movies. Turtle and Cubby are these two very minor Piston Cup reporters who are filming the TV broadcast of Bob Cutlass and Daryl Cartrip at the tiebreaker race at the end of the movie. We only know their names because they're written on their cameras, and the two have never received any form of merchandise. Yeah, but Tim Rimmer over here got a normal release and a lenticular release. Come on, guys, justice for Turtle and Cubby. Cars 3 Mud Software. Making the mud in the Thunder Hollow Demolition Derby in Cars 3 act realistic ended up being a challenge for Pixar's animators. Because of this, they created a whole new software to better animate the mud. Missing drag racers. This is another segment I actually had to re-record following my original recording of this video when I recorded the first segments of it back in August. A puzzle, I believe it's a puzzle or some other form of merchandise, but again, I think it's a puzzle, for the XRS Drag Racers line includes images of drag racer versions of Brian Spark and Sheldon Shifter. Now, the XRS drag racing line was strangely smaller than the other XRS lines, only getting a total of about 6 cars in one wave, where the other XRS lines both got 3 waves total. So, I don't know why they never made more, but it seems that Brian and Sheldon, at least according to this puzzle, were planned to be made. While Mattel didn't make them and many fans forgot about them for several years, when the Disney Store began making their own drag racers 2 years after Mattel in 2021, they just recently released a Mac hauler that includes drag racer variants of both Sheldon Shifter and Brian Spark. So at the very least, we have some form of merchandise for these, even if it isn't 1/55 scale. Handheld port changes. Before, handheld ports of video games could basically be identical to their console counterparts like they are nowadays, the older Cars video games and several other ports of video games had to resort to stripping down their games and making them a whole lot simpler so they could run on handheld systems. These resulted in a lot of weird changes for the Cars video games, like a completely different story mode in the Cars 2 DS game, as well as just a bunch of changes to tracks and character layouts among all of the games. None of these games are really all that similar to their console counterparts with the exception of their names and what the tracks are called and some of the characters they feature. One of the most well-known handheld changes for the Cars video games is the fact that Emma was playable in the handheld version of Race-O-Rama despite not even being in the console version, and of all characters, Lizzie was playable in the handheld versions of Cars Mater National. That's absolutely incredible. We really need more video games where you could play as Lizzie. Please. Cancelled video game characters. There are a lot of characters that were planned to be in different Cars video games, but were cut from them. So many that it would take way too long to list all of them here and go into detail about them here, so I plan to do a full video on them in the near future. But some of the most notable ones include Finn McMissile originally being planned to be playable in Disney Infinity, with the Lemons appearing as enemies. Finn is in the final version of the game, but as an NPC. Luigi appears in concept art for Cars 3 Driven to Win, a game that he is absent from for... Why isn't Luigi there when Guido is? Also, World Grand Prix McQueen appears here in this concept art, but this was probably just a placeholder before the Cars 3 McQueen design was done. There are a bunch of characters for Cars 2, the video game, and Fast as Lightning, including Ramon, Nigel Gearsley, and some others for Fast as Lightning, several of which seem like they'd probably be NPCs. And probably the most interesting of all of these, some code and a character icon for Stanley are in the Cars Mater National game. Again, I'm going to go way in depth on all of these in an upcoming video. Lead Sarge. This is one of just a few of the darker entries on the iceberg here. In 2007, Mattel recalled a bunch of Sarge diecasts for including high amounts of lead paint in them. This is probably why no Sarge diecast was released the following year in 2008. Some people have asked me to do a whole video covering this situation, and who knows, maybe I will in the future. In fact, I think a lot of different things on this iceberg could warrant their own video where I go more in depth. So, if anything on this iceberg interests you and you'd like me to do an even deeper dive on it in its own video, pun very intended there, definitely let me know. Mike and Sully are real. This isn't a reference to Mike and Sully being in Tokyo Mater like I talked about earlier. Instead, it's a reference to the fact that Mike and Sully appear in the Cars Mater National game and the Monster Truck races, and both of them are playable. It's straight up the Mike and Sully cars. They're there, hanging out in Radiator Springs. You can see them driving by. They even have their own mini game in the game. They're labeled as like special guest stars on the back of the box. So, I guess that means that Mike and Sully really exist in the Cars universe. What's the deal with that? Or I'd assume maybe they're actors? They're actors who played the parts of Mike and Sully in the Monsters, Inc. parody from the end of the first movie. Does that mean that all of the Pixar parody movies they watch are live action? Like, how does this work? In 2012, a line of special silver metallic World Grand Prix racers was released. A few years later, in 2015, when these cars were re-released, they were changed to be a part of the TROC line, with TROC logos on their packaging, new silver artwork, and even a backstory on the back of the box, giving the backstory of the TROC silver race. These cars are a very odd case, as they're one of very few retcons in the Cars series, that being changing something's state within the canon. Originally, these were just fun, one-off metallic diecasts, but when they were re-released, they became an official part of the story of the Cars universe. Sidley and Planes. Sidley the Spy Jet appears as a background character in both of the Planes movies, appearing in the Mexico City airport in the first movie, and showing up to deliver passengers to the Grand Fuselage in Planes Fire and Rescue. Whether or not this is supposed to be Sidley, or if it's just Disney reusing assets from a previous movie, is unknown. Midnight Flyers. At the tail end of the Planes diecast line, see what I did there? That's a plane pun. A diecast called Midnight Flyers Dusty was released, being the only ever super chase in the Planes diecast line. This was a release that really went under the radar as the Planes line was dying out at the time. The Midnight Flyers was pretty similar to the XRS or TROC lines for the regular Cars diecast series, being an original story creating cool-looking, unique character variants. The back of the packaging even gives a description for what Midnight Flyers is all about. When bad weather causes Dusty and friends to miss a daytime air show, they refuse to let their fans down. They gear up with new lights and paint to perform the first ever night flight air show. The back of the box promises at least 2 other mysterious, unknown Midnight Flyers, but the line was sadly cancelled when the rest of the Planes diecast line was cancelled. Who these other 2 planes were have since been revealed, or rather leaked, as we now have prototype images of them. El Chupacabra and Ripslinger were planned to be the other 2 Midnight Flyers. Honestly though, I think Midnight Flyers Dusty looks really cool. I should try to get... Never mind then. Where is Sally? This next one has just bothered me for the longest time, okay? There is so much Cars media and Cars merchandise where Sally is just strangely missing. For whatever reason, compared to the other main characters, for years, Sally never really felt like a priority. She wasn't in Mater National or Race-O-Rama. She wasn't in Fast as Lightning at all. So why wasn't Sally used in all of these different places? I feel like it was only until Cars 3 came out where Sally had a significantly larger role than she did in Cars 2, and it was really shown as Lightning's sort of emotional support, that the series started focusing on Sally more and merchandise. And it's about time. Sally has had more diecasts than ever in the past few years. She's had several mini racer variants, although it took 2 years for her to get a mini, so again, still took a while. And she's really being accepted as a major character in the series now, which is great because I feel like it wasn't like that for years. Living Wheels. A cancelled Cars tune that was revealed in the Cars tune DVD is one called Backwards to the Forward, which does not follow the naming convention of the rest of the Mater's Tall Tales, but whatever. While this idea was later evolved into what we got as Time Travel Mater in 2012, Backwards to the Forwards is very different and very interesting. In it, Mater time travels all the way back to prehistoric times where he finds a group of tribal, caveman-like living wheels, suggesting that cars are a highly evolved form of these living stone wheels, which is a really funny concept. It would be really weird to see if it were actually made to have that be part of the Cars lore, but I don't know, I think that's pretty funny. Real dinosaurs. Also in Backwards to the Forward, Mater encounters some real dinosaurs. Not cars, real actual dinosaurs. Because according to Pixar, Dinoco had to come from somewhere. You know what? That's a pretty good point. It was really clever of them to think that way. The Dinoco logo is not some sort of carified dinosaur. It just straight up is a dinosaur. So as weird as it is, yeah, I guess it kind of makes sense that real non-vehicle dinosaurs existed in the Cars universe in prehistoric times. With that Cars tune having been cancelled, we don't have any confirmation as to whether or not real dinosaurs exist in the Cars universe, or rather, existed in the Cars universe. Recently, we got some concept art for Cars on the Road that showed these big robotic vehicle dinosaurs coming from an episode called Dinosaur Park that seems to be a sort of Jurassic Park style parody with these dinosaur vehicles in a theme park. So yeah, maybe then we'll see later on this year if dinosaurs that weren't vehicles ever existed in the Cars universe. But I think at this point, they're going to say that the dinosaurs were vehicles, just because at this point, everything in the Cars universe is a vehicle. Cars 2 without Otis. I had several different books retelling the story of Cars 2 when I was younger, and there was one part that was in a bunch of them that always confused me. Otis, the rusty car that Mater tows, introducing us to what a lemon is early on in the movie, is nowhere to be found, and the scene where Mater tows him is instead replaced with Mater putting together a shrine to welcome back McQueen. Not much is known about this, I don't think. I couldn't find any additional information on it online, unfortunately. But yeah, this version of the scene was in several different books that retold the story of Cars 2. I'd assume that it was a scene that was cut and replaced with the Otis scene, probably, so that, again, we could get to know what the lemons were early on. One of these books was the junior novelization of Cars 2, which is definitely pretty interesting. Junior novelizations almost always use earlier versions of their film scripts, so there are always bound to be changes. And this is not the last time we'll be hearing about something from the junior novelization of Cars 2, which I actually used to own and I think I might still own. Mater can't be knighted. At the end of Cars 2, Mater becomes Sir Tow Mater for saving the Queen of England. Cars 2 gets so weird when you try to explain it. But anyway, Mater actually would not be able to be knighted in real life as he isn't from England. Now, I believe he could be honorarily knighted, but he can't be, fully knighted like he is in the movie, since, again, he's from America. Todd used to be green. One of Todd Marcus's alternate costumes in Cars Fast as Lightning is called Rookie Green. This name suggests that in Todd Marcus's rookie year of the Piston Cup, he was painted green instead of red. Craig Faster in Cars 3. The Cars 3 credits return with a vengeance, as this time, they're making confusing statements about the Cars canon. An ID badge for a Rusty's Racing Center trainee named Craig Faster is shown at one point in the credits. But this makes no sense, as Craig Faster is the name of a Rusty monster truck pickup truck who appears in the Rusty's tent scene of the first Cars movie. Now, why this name is listed here, I don't know, but I do have a theory regarding it. Craig Fester's diecast was released in November of 2016 for the first time ever, that's when his name was revealed, and Cars 3 was released in June of 2017. Maybe they were working on the Cars 3 credits around this time, and somebody just needed a random car name to put on this ID badge, and they went with Craig Fester. Maybe they found a list of names of potential upcoming Cars characters and went with it. I don't know, but if it is the real Craig Fester, then I hope that guy can live out his dreams and truly become a Piston Cup racer, just like his idol, Lightning McQueen. Thomasville Danny. The Thomasville Racers line was a pretty cool one released back in 2018, featuring several Piston Cup racers repainted as veteran racers that appear in the flashbacks in Cars 3. Among these was Herb Kerbler, who was painted like Jet Robinson. But there's a strange inconsistency here, as Tomica, who creates a Cars diecast line in Japan, made their own set of Thomasville racers where Danny Swervez was Jet Robinson instead. All of the rest of Tomica's Thomasville racers line up perfectly with the ones Mattel made. They even made some that Mattel didn't make, like the King and Cruz. So why there's this error with Danny and Herb, I have no idea. The Queen can't use weapons. This one's a pretty funny and obscure piece of Cars trivia, although honestly there isn't all that much to say about it. It's pretty straightforward. The Queen of England from Cars 2 appeared as a playable character in the DLC for Cars 2, the video game. But, unlike every other character in the game, she can't use weapons in the battle races. Alan Axler. Some of the first cars revealed to be released for 2021 were revealed for a web retailer called Smith's Toys. One of their listings, specifically their listing for the re-release of Aiken Axler for the year, labeled him very strangely, calling him Alan Aiken Axler instead of Aiken Axler, with Aiken being in quotes as if it were a nickname. Now, Aiken has had a name for nearly 15 years at this point, so changing it now seems kind of odd, but isn't something that I would put past Mattel. However, when his diecast was revealed for 2021, when the images came out, when the car was released, he was still just labeled as Aiken Axler, so what the deal with this was, I have no clue. Female Spiky. Concept art for Cars 3 Little Torquey Piston's Next Gen racer Spiky Phillips seemingly depicts the character as female, giving the character the eyeliner usually used for female characters. However, in the final version of the movie, later confirmed by his diecast and diecast artwork, he is male. Monty. According to a 2017 chapter book called Cars Origins Struck by Lightning, yes, that is the real name, Lightning McQueen's birth name was Montgomery, or Monty McQueen. King of the World Grand Prix. Early concept art for Cars 2 features a yellow version of the King as one of the World Grand Prix racers. As far as I know, he only exists in this one piece of concept art. Driven to Win uses the wrong logos. There's a multiplayer mode in Cars 3 Driven to Win, which allows you and another person to choose Piston Cup sponsors that you'll race as for some races. These fully change the color of your car and also put the Piston Cup sponsors' logos on them. The 4 sponsors that you can choose are Rust-eze, Dynaco, Gasprin, and Shiny Wax, obviously chosen for their color schemes so that you can have players being blue, red, yellow, and green. Each of these has their own distinct color scheme, but this game actually uses the wrong logos for Gasprin and Shiny Wax, using their Cars 1 logos instead of their Cars 3 logos. And on a side note, Gasprin's racer has never been yellow. The color for the Gasprin racer has always been purple, despite the yellow in the Gasprin pill in the logo. Heck, in Cars 3, the pills in the logo became half purple anyway. Boost in Toy Story 3. We all know about the Finn McMissile Easter egg in Toy Story 3. A poster of Finn McMissile shows up on Andy's wall, referencing the fact that their next movie coming out at the time was Cars 2. But, to hide this, the original trailer of Toy Story 3 didn't show Finn on the wall. Instead, it showed this very obnoxious poster of a non-living version of Boost. That is really distracting. I'm glad it wasn't in the final version of the movie, but it's massive. Car life insurance. For years, people have joked, asking if the Cars characters would have car insurance or life insurance, as they're alive, but they're also cars, so, like, what would they have, right? Well, a billboard in the background of Thunder Hollow in Cars 3 reveals that they have car life insurance. See what they did there? They combined them. Micro Drifter Dale. At the 2012 Comic-Con, when the Cars Micro Drifter toy line was first shown off, Dale Earnhardt Jr. was shown to be one of the Piston Cup racers being released. But he was never released, instead being replaced by Manny Flywheel in the final version of the toy line. This is because they had lost the rights to make merchandise for Dale Earnhardt Jr. Bare Metal series. This is the thing on the Iceberg that I could find the least amount of information on. There are several prototype images out there of canceled cars from a toy line that seems to be called the Bare Metal series. Whether this is a real name or just a fan-given name, I'm not sure. Some of the cars in this series include a Cars 1 Lightning, a Cars 1 Mater, and some of the Cars 2 pit crew variants of the other main characters like Sarge and Guido. The gimmick of this series is that these cars are pretty much unpainted. Think Thomas Wood, except they actually look kind of okay. Any further details on this series, I don't know. But I'd love to do a video on them in the future, so if anybody has any information on the bare metal cars, definitely leave it in the comments. Big Al's appearance. In the first Cars movie, Lizzie mentions a car named Big Al who would be strong enough to fix the road, to which Ramon tells her that Big Al left like 15 years ago. Lizzie once again brings up Big Al in Cars the video game, asking Lightning, "Big Al, is that you?" While I'm sure most Cars fans are aware of the character of Big Al, not many people know that he actually has a physical appearance. He actually appeared once, and no, he's not this RV, Albert Hinkey, whose nickname is Big Al. Which will make me once again ask the question, why is there more than one character named Big Al in the Cars series? That's so weird. But anyway, in the first volume of the Radiator Springs comic series, a thing that I don't even think I knew existed, we very briefly see Big Al driving away from Radiator Springs. We don't see his front, we barely see any of him, but he appears to be a purple Volkswagen of some kind. Michelle Motoretta. This one is just kind of a stupid one that's really obscure and has bothered me for years. Michelle Motoretta is a member of the Autobahn Society who appears very, very, very briefly during Lightning's Dinoco Daydream in the first Cars movie. Michelle is notable because her diecast, released in 2016, has her name in quotes, when the rest of the Autobahn Society don't have their names in quotes. Why is Michelle Motoretta in quotes? Is it a nickname? If so, why isn't it written like the other characters who have nicknames, like Ruby Easy Oaks, or other characters like that? Is it a fake name? Nobody knows. Nobody has any idea as to why Michelle's name is in quotes, and I will never understand it. And that's why it's at the bottom of the iceberg, because it's super obscure, and, like, I don't think anybody cares, but also, like, what is up with it? Zombie cars. Not to be confused with the graveyard cars that appear in the deleted scene where Lightning ends up in a graveyard and then later appeared in the Radiator Springs 500 and a half short. These zombie cars originated from the World of Cars online game in a few of their Halloween events over the years, starting in the 2010 Halloween event, Scaryator Springs. That's a pun right there. These zombie cars are an urban legend in Radiator Springs and are known for wanting to eat brakes. That's also a pun. The zombie cars that appear in the game, however, are not real zombies. Instead, they are a group of cars who are dressed up as zombies. Whether or not zombie cars really exist in the Cars universe is unknown. Ooh, it's the bottom of the iceberg. I'm supposed to act all creepy and scary now or something. Mater's song isn't from Cars 3. The song that Mater sings while putting together his junk sculpture in Cars 3 is actually a rewritten version of a song from a 1956 Earth Day cartoon made by Disney called Humphrey the Bear in the Bag. The song is called Put It in the Bag, and it's an instructional song sung by two bears to show them how to clean up trash by putting it in bags. I swear you can't make this up. Ducky Fauntleroy's name. Ducky Fauntleroy was a minor character in Cars 3 who appeared in some of Doc's racing flashbacks, who was named when he got his own diecast in 2021. Ducky Fauntleroy's name may seem odd, but it turns out to be a very obscure reference to none other than Disney's own Donald Duck. As, if you're to look up what Donald Duck's middle name is, you'll see that Donald's middle name is Fauntleroy. This was first revealed on Donald Duck's draft notice in the 1942 cartoon Donald Gets Drafted. Oh. VIN Barcode Easter Egg. The VIN racers from Cars Race-O-Rama that I spoke about earlier on have a barcode on the sides of each of them. But this isn't just some random combination of lines, as it turns out that the barcode on the side of the VIN racers is actually the exact same barcode as the one found on the Cars DVD. That is such a deep cut, I don't even know how people first found that out. That's incredible. Herbie. Herbie the Love Bug is a classic live-action Disney character, an anthropomorphic car that first appeared in a series of movies back in the 60s. Since he was a Disney character who is a living car, I always thought that he would be a perfect fit for an Easter egg in the Cars series. But no, instead he had a cameo in Finding Dory. Why? Why not just put him in Cars? Well, it turns out that I wasn't the only one who thought Herbie would make for a great fit in the Cars universe, as he actually does have a Cars universe counterpart who appeared very briefly in some of the Boom Studios Cars comics as a hippie friend of Fillmore's and a racer who's even gone up against the fabulous Hudson Hornet himself. A diecast in Cars 3. For the last and final time, this one comes from the Cars 3 credits, in which a poster with some images of some pitties on it is shown at one point. While the other posters throughout the Cars 3 credits reuse images of characters that are pre-existing, another poster with some pitties on it features some edited images of pre-existing pitty artwork. This one, instead, literally features an image of a pitty diecast instead of a CGI render of a pitty. This is literally a photoshopped image of the Trunk Fresh pitty diecast, just with the Trunk Fresh logos erased, meaning that an image of a live-action, real-world Cars diecast made it into Cars 3's credits. Thanks, Cars 3 credits. You rock! And you've been the bane of my existence for this entire 2-hour video. Acer in Cars 3. This is one of my all-time favorite Easter eggs in the Cars series. I absolutely love this one. In the Letters About You scene, where Smokey is showing Lightning all of the letters he's collected about him over the years, one of the newspaper clippings shows a news report about Acer being thrown into the laboratory services truck in Cars 2, which happens, of course, during the tarmac escape sequence. I absolutely love this Easter egg. It confirms that the events of Cars 2 happened, which a lot of people think that Cars 2 wasn't canon. This confirms that it was, in fact, canon, and I just love this Easter egg. It was only recently discovered, too, and it is really, really cool. Also in this scene, it turns out that one of the articles was written by a car named Vic Vanley, who, much like Craig Facer, who we discussed earlier, was a Cars diecast released in 2016. Once again, probably a case of them reusing names, but Vic Vanley is a background character in Tokyo in Cars 2, and this reveals that apparently he's a journalist. 155 scale Screaming Banshee. A lot of people are probably aware of the Mini Adventures version of the Screaming Banshee, a toy that ate the Mini Adventures cars. That's fun. But barely anybody is aware of the fact that there was a 155 scale version of the Screaming Banshee planned to be released at one point. In 2015, Cars blog site Take5aday.com reported on a prototype of a 155 scale Screaming Banshee who was never fully made. As you can see, the prototype is the wrong color. It's green instead of yellow, since the reference photos they were given weren't entirely accurate. It's missing a lot of the Screaming Banshee's accessories, which were probably going to be plastic inserts, whereas the rest of the car was metal, or they just hadn't been put on at that point. I totally get why this car was canceled. Definitely a very, very surprising release. I'm not sure when it was originally supposed to be made. I'd assume the earlier days of the Cars diecast line, but in 2013, 2015, and a few other years, they released some very large Cars characters as Comic-Con and D23 exclusives. In fact, Albert Hinkey was released in 2015 as a D23 exclusive, so yeah, don't really know when this guy was considered to be released. But as you could see with this prototype, they definitely didn't get too far into production with the Screaming Banshee diecast. Hot Rod Steve is in Cars 3. Hot Rod Steve Herschel is an exceptionally odd Cars diecast, being cancelled for a release in 2019 before finally coming out in 2021. This is a version of a background character in Cars 3 who we never even see the front of, now with flames painted on him to go alongside Smokey and the Legends, of which he has no association with. Everybody is very confused by this diecast, nobody knows why it exists, and everyone is very quick to point out the fact that it wasn't even in the movie. But can we be so sure about that? We never see the front of Steve Herschel in Cars 3. So, what if Steve in Cars 3 did have flames on his front, and we just never saw it because we never see his front in the movie? What if Hot Rod Steve Herschel is actually what Steve Herschel looks like? Toys in the Cozy Cone, my all-time favorite Easter egg in the Cars franchise. In Cars Land, if you go around to the back of the main building in the Cozy Cone, a building you can't enter but you can look into, you'll see a bunch of cones, of course. That's kind of the gimmick of the motel. But if you look very, very closely, you'll find an array of Toy Story characters hidden underneath some of the cones, referencing the scene in Toy Story 2 where the toys cross the street by going underneath cones. Finn and Crash Course. The 2010 Cars book Crash Course features a scene of a bunch of racers all lined up, which are just cheaply airbrushed over images of them from Meet the Cars, just saying. But in addition to all of these cars, there's one that looks nearly identical to Finn McMissile. Now, this book came out before Cars 2, but still, this guy looks too much like Finn for this to be a coincidence. This has to be some sort of in-joke. At this point, since it was released so close to the release of Cars 2, there's no way that Finn's design wasn't finalized. So I'm just going to say this is probably just an Easter egg referencing Finn. Also, there's one character in the book that looks strangely like Cruz, so, maybe this book can just predict the future. Maybe this guy will appear in Cars on the Road. Who knows? Underminer car. In the Route 66 comic series, Mac has a dream sequence where aliens abduct him and all of the other Pixar parody cars that are of characters voiced by John Ratzenberger. Now, I'm just getting this information from the Cars Wiki, and I wish I had images of this, okay? Because this sounds incredible. This is a dream sequence Mac has. Among all of the other John Ratzenberger cameo cars that we saw in the first Cars movie, there's one that we didn't see in Cars. A carified version of the Underminer, the character that Ratzenberg cameoed as in The Incredibles. Luigi and Guido are cousins. The Cars 2 Junior novelization strikes back, as one part of the book when Luigi and Guido first arrive in Italy to meet their family states that the two of them are cousins. Whether this is canon or not is completely and totally unknown. I don't really think the Cars 2 Junior novelization is canon, because again, it includes that alternate Otis scene I mentioned earlier. So yeah. Are Luigi and Guido related? I'd assume in some way. I think cousins make sense, but they could also just be good friends. Lego Leland Turbo. Leland Turbo was a character that appeared in Cars 2, who was famously crushed into a garbage cube off-screen at the beginning of the movie. He's the reason why Finn McMissile goes to the oil rig at the beginning of the movie. He's looking for a car, specifically his agent friend Leland. Now, when it comes to merchandise, I'm sure, as you would assume, he doesn't really have all that much. He does have a 1/55 scale diecast release, of course, of his Alive version, who was released in a 2-pack with Finn McMissile back in 2011. This is pretty well known as he's gotten pretty rare over the years. But Leland has another piece of merchandise, one with far darker implications for the character. Lego's version of the oil rig includes Leland's garbage cube as a character in the set. But unlike in the movie, where he's just a compacted, crushed cube, this version of Leland has eyes, and they're open, meaning that Lego Leland Turbo is still alive. He's just crushed into a garbage cube. He can't move, he can't speak, but his eyes are still open. Wow, Lego. That's pretty dark. And there you have it, guys. My entire Disney Cars Iceberg broken down. Thank you all so much for watching this video. In the future, who knows, maybe I'll make a part 2. If I do, it definitely won't be this long. It'll probably just be like an addendum, adding some additional stuff to it, because I know there is still a lot more stuff out there that I can add. Once again, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye now.